Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Oda Nobukatsu. He's a limited 1-star servant who, as of this recording, has only been available during Guruguru Yamateikoku and it's a rerun, so if you don't have him yet, better grab a few hundred before the event ends. As a limited 1-star, he can only be obtained via the friend point gacha, but his abnormal status gives him a disproportionate servant coin bounty. This makes him excellent fodder for the future grail casting mechanic. You just need the coins though, so once you NP5 him, with maybe a few spares just in case, you should dispose of the extra copies as you see fit. That's his strategic element. Now let's get tactical. Nobukatsu's first skill is Immature Scheme. It's a single target debuff that applies confusion, which can turn into a single turn skill seal. It also applies a 3-turn buster resistance reduction. Usually I just dump it out on the biggest target on turn 1 and wait for that skill seal to pop. This will force your target to only use attacks, and given what Nobukatsu does, you may find this property quite useful. Next up we have I Shall Die for the Heavens. It generates up to 15 stars per turn and grants a party crit damage buff. But if you have Nobunaga on the front line, they gain 2 additional effects, star absorption and more crit damage. And these aren't small potatoes either. The generic crit buff is stuck at a flat 20%, but the Nobunaga bonus goes all the way up to a staggering 80%. We'll get back to the implications of the skill in a little bit. The last of Nobukatsu's skills is Arabana of War, a single turn taunt that increases NP gain from being hit and a 3k heal on death. It has a short 4-turn cooldown at max level, but given what it does, that's unlikely to be a factor. The idea behind the heal is that you deliberately let your Nobunagas take damage, which isn't very nice, Mr. Nobukatsu, but then you make up for it with his death heal. Alternatively, Avenger Nobu sees the most benefit from this due to her self-burn mechanic. A good time to use this is when Immature Scheme's skill seal activates, since enemies will use all their actions attacking him. If he dies in the process, no biggie. You get the heal and you can even leverage an on-death craft essence to help out from beyond the grave. The Merciless One and Battle of Camlan give charge to your other teammates, while 500-year Obsession locks your enemy out of their NP for 2 turns. You can even use his Banzai E. On death, it'll grant a 2-hit evasion to your Nobunagas, so if you've been backlining him in lotto events, you might actually have something quite useful sitting in your inventory. But if Nobukatsu somehow survives, he has one final trick up his sleeve. Nobukatsu's noble phantasm is Demonic King's Turning Tide, Manjusaka. It's a non-damaging buster card that grants party charge capping out at 20% for an NP5 Nobukatsu. It grants a flat buster buff for Nobunagas and a 3-turn general buster buff tied to overcharge. By the way, it also kills him. If you're going to use Nobukatsu in a non-Nobunaga team, treat him as extra disposable because this isn't worth the trouble of keeping him barely alive. Nobukatsu has no backstop built into his kit, so letting him survive his taunt turn might require extra resources, and that defeats his purpose. Treat him as a cheap taunter. Unload his skills and leave him to fend for himself. If he somehow survives, hopefully he got enough charge from being hit to be able to NP. That'll get him off the field. With a Nobunaga though, the equation changes. There are 3 Nobunagas as of this recording: Berserker, Archer, and Avenger Nobu. Berserker Nobu normally has a 1-turn absorption buff, so Nobukatsu's lasting absorption effect helps her a lot. Also, no native crit buff, so that helps tremendously too. She has her own stars per turn effect, so she and Nobukatsu can keep the gravy train going for the first few turns. Mao Nobu has stars per turn and a battery, but lacks absorption/crit effects. Nobukatsu provides both, and his absorption buff caps out at 3000%, which is the right ballpark for low base absorption classes like Avengers and Berserkers. For these two, Nobukatsu's taunt does double duty, screening them from damage since neither can fall back on defensive class advantage to stay healthy. As for Archer Nobunaga, she's a very star-hungry servant and would appreciate Nobukatsu's stars per turn buff. The charge on his NP might come in handy too, but because Nobukatsu relies on being hit to get charged up, he can be quite inconsistent when it comes to busting out his die move. To compensate, using a starting charge CE can save you a lot of trouble. For an immediate and explosive crit turn, consider Golden Catches the Carp, which also dumps out stars on entry. Then there's the crazy pick, Cope Scope, or as it's otherwise known, the Great Marshal of Magic. It's K-Scope, but with all its stats put into health instead of attack. For the overwhelming majority of servants, it's strictly worse than K-Scope, because a level 1 Cope Scope will contribute just as much to your damage as a level 100 Cope Scope. But for a low rarity taunter like Nobukatsu, his damage output is embarrassingly bad anyway, so he sees more benefit from Cope Scope's extra survivability. Now this does counteract his low deployment cost, so if you run this, make sure it's a fight where his noble phantasm matters. If cost is extremely tight though, consider Dragon's Meridian for its bare-bones starting charge, or even the 1-star Craft Essence Starvation for defensive NP gain. You very much do want to get Nobukatsu off the field. His weak cards eat into your potential Nobunaga damage, so once his star income is exhausted, he's more of an impediment than anything else. You're encouraged to use him as cannon fodder, but you should keep some things in mind. Don't tunnel excessively on that noble phantasm. You might be trying to get every last drop of value out of him, but depending on the fight, keeping him alive might be more trouble than it's worth. For instance, you might encounter an enemy so aggressive that Nobukatsu can't survive on the field without something like volume and Hardregerum. At that point, I'd either let him drop on turn 1 or consider a different strategy altogether. If you're gonna go with a one and done strat, try Ox Demon King to make up for his NP's Buster buff. Another thing to be careful about is running a thin backline. Because Nobukatsu is so good at getting himself off the field, you might be tempted to try for a solo setup. Getting Nobunaga alone on the field is easy enough, but what you need to understand is that the Nobunagas aren't really soloists. They're all needy attackers that either want resources from their teammates, like Archer Nobu, or reduced likelihood of getting hit. Berserker and Avenger Nobu have protection effects, but they're not geared towards long-term survivability. You leave them alone for any length of time and they're gonna get chunked out. Overall, Nobukatsu fills in flaws in the various Nobunaga's kits. He's good as an extra support specifically for them, but he's not a substitute for the big rocket fuel type servants, especially Koyanskaya. At the end of the day, a 50% battery and charge reduction is a hard act to top. That said, I'd strongly recommend keeping a copy in your roster, especially if you have one of the Nobunagas already. You never know if they're going to release a new Nobu or give one of them a major buff. If that day comes, Nobukatsu's usefulness is going to go through the roof. His banner might not return though, so get him while you can, or wait and hope. Now then, let's talk about Nobukatsu in real life. Fair warning that A, I'm not a real historian, just a nerd, so take what I'm about to say with a lot of salt. And B, English language info is sparse on a bit player like Nobukatsu, so the details are going to be fuzzy. With that said, let's get on with it. If you look up Oda Nobukatsu, you don't get the guy in this game. Well, you literally do, but let me rephrase that. FGO aside, the real person that comes up is someone else. The Nobukatsu in FGO is more commonly known as Oda Nobuyuki. He's Nobunaga's younger brother. The pair were born during the Sengoku period, a free-for-all where local lords picked apart the carcass of the disintegrating Ashikaga shogunate. They were the sons of one of those lords. After their father's death, Nobunaga became the head of the Oda clan, but not everyone was happy with his development. Nobunaga already had the nickname Fool of Owari by this point, supposedly acting like a lunatic in his youth. Some within the clan wondered whether the intelligent and dignified Nobukatsu would make for a better leader. With whisperings like that, Nobukatsu bought into his own hype. He schemed to overthrow Nobunaga with a clan of his retainers. He also roped Shibata Katsuye into his schemes. You as an FGO player might know him better as that asshole berserker with 3 million health. Despite supposedly having an army more than twice as large, Nobukatsu lost the engagement. He was about to lose his head too, but their mother was able to convince Nobunaga to hold off. Kind of impressive if you consider that Nobunaga had to deal with multiple family members pulling this shit already. The upside is that among those spared was Katsuye, who while remaining in Nobukatsu's service, swore loyalty to Nobunaga and tipped him off to future developments. You see, Nobukatsu just couldn't help himself. Within a year he was back in the kitchen, and Nobunaga resolved to never let this little bastard cook again. He sent word to Nobukatsu that he'd come down with something bad. Real bad. When Nobukatsu showed up to take stock of his poor older brother, and maybe see if he could move up the timetable on that second rebellion, Nobunaga's men dragged him off to be butchered. A worthier opponent might have been allowed the dignity of taking his own life, but Nobukatsu was no rival. He was a snake, and given a snake's death. And so ends the story of Oda Nobuyuki. The name Nobukatsu would live on, however, as Nobunaga gave it to one of his sons. Then again, that Nobukatsu was written with a different set of characters, so maybe it's not so sentimental after all. Fate Grand Order presents these events as all being a part of Nobukatsu's plan to turn Nobunaga into someone ruthless enough to unite Japan, but this seems to be an invention specific to the game. In real life, the two weren't nearly so close. That's the TLDR. Thanks for watching. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more, and come to me at twitch.tv/Finotaisen where I stream every weekend, 3 p.m. Pacific time, Friday through Sunday. I also have another YouTube channel where I upload some of the more curious moments from my streams, so take a look there if you want a taste. I'll see you there.